jumping into finals, Pokemon trainers. It's going to be Miraidon and Incineroar versus Incineroar and Calyrex Shadow Rider.
Yeah, you can see both trainers here have led out with their Incineroars to have that fake out support. One is going to take a bit more of an advantage from this than the other because the Calyrex right now is immune to it and free to go for an attack onto both of these targets that it probably will outspeed. It will be able to get the Astral Barrage into the Miraidon, but do you want to leave it vulnerable to taking an Electro Drift? Do you want to go for the fake out into that slot because you want to try and mitigate as much damage early on as possible if you're Lewis? And then it does leave the opposing Incineroar that does threaten the Calyrex to go from maybe a knockoff into the Calyrex, so you can't really leave it open too much, especially in that Ghost typing. Maybe you want to commit to that Terrestrialization early on here to mitigate that Dark type threat.
I think as well, we know how speedy Michael's Incineroar is, but even if it goes for that fake out, the Helping Hand would have gone first. But Incineroar's leaving the field. We're going to override that terrain, shut down the Hadron engine on Miraidon's side, and bring the grassy terrain to the floor. And you can pressure some fake out into the next turn on that Rillaboom side. Also a Protect coming through from the Calyrex. So a nice defensive switch up here on Lewis's side as Michael is left in the driving seat to go for the Electro Drift that goes into Protect. So no damage is going to come through on Michael's side here from that Miraidon. But the Incineroar able to reposition with a U-turn, taking a leaf out of the opposing side here, getting the fake out user out to come back in later on.
Yeah, it's a nice play here for Lewis, just to be able to reposition, get rid of the electric terrain as well. And Michelle kind of not going for the Volt Switch like you would maybe expect into the Incineroar slot, so it can get out and reposition, bring that electric terrain back in later, expecting maybe something like the Rillaboom to come onto the field. Now it has got that active fake out, it can slow down the Miraidon for one more turn, and it opens the door for the Calyrex to be able to start performing, throwing those Astral Barrages that are so devastating onto the field. But a really good response from Michelle with that Grimmsnarl, now going to have access to that screen support, Spirit Break, which can slow down the Calyrex, as well as that Thunder Wave. Just got to be careful in case it does go for that Terrestrialization.
I mean, he said that the Grimmsnarl has not been strong for him. He's brought it to only 3 games. Well, now he's brought it to 4, including this final. So I think the Spirit Break, if you are trying to catch that Dark Terrestrialization on Calyrex's side, is in a really nice position. Not only is it super effective damage, but you're also lowering that special attack. But Calyrex not falling for it. Lewis gets it out of here.
Yeah, and a really good decision, I think, because it is in that vulnerable position where it's not really going to be able to offer too much going forward and could get some unnecessary damage or into a position where it could get Thunder Wave when you don't want to commit that Terrestrialization. Fake up from the Rillaboom, slowing down that Miraidon, preventing it from switching out, at least this turn, as that screen is set from the Grimmsnarl. Going to give a little bit of extra defense against those special attackers that are so threatening from Lewis's side.
Yeah, it's a shame neither of them are on the field right now. You've got those physical attackers with Incineroar and Rillaboom, but you know the Calyrex is in the back, so that's something to bear in mind. It's holding the light clay, so it is going to be for those 8 extended turns.
Yeah, and you've got the fake out coming in from the Incineroar now on Lewis's side, and yes, it can slow down the Miraidon once again, but yeah, if you're not pivoting out and getting something in that Rillaboom slot now, then the next turn you're kind of putting yourself in a vulnerable position, especially with your Incineroar. Do you have a safe switch in from the back that you can take an Electro Drift with? Yes, the electric train's not set up, but you've still got to remember that it is holding that Choice Specs item and can still do some devastating damage.
I think as well, you know, Grimmsnarl taking note of the situation, saying, hey, I can go for my Reflect here. Either you fake out into me and then I can't, but then Miraidon gets a big amount of damage out on the field. So now a lot of defensive capabilities up on Michael's side. And almost in a way, you want the Grimmsnarl to go down or just get off the field so you can bring in your offensive powerhouses to start cleaning through Lewis's team. But Lewis playing really well with the pivoting Pokemon, as we like to say here, because Rillaboom's gone for that U-turn, gives him the opportunity to adjust. And I like the time that he's taking here. This is the Grand Finals, the best of 3. You want to use every second that you can to be able to make sure you're not going to overcorrect or misplay and bring the correct Pokemon in for the situation.
That's true, and you are mitigating any sort of damage from Michelle's end from that big powerhouse in the Miraidon, but at the same time, you've got that. If you're Michelle, you've been able to set your screens up pretty freely here, and you're in that nice position now where you can start utilizing that Thunder Wave into the Zamazenta. That might be a really nice option to slow that Pokemon down, and then you've got the chance, if you can get that Paralysis onto it, of preventing it from moving. Got a 1 in 4 chance. If you do go for that, of course, then you can go for the Electro Drift into the Incineroar here, get some nice damage onto that, or you might want to just revert to switching that out for now. You have to be careful around the Zamazenta going for the Behemoth Bash into the Grimmsnarl, of course. That is going to take super effective damage, but at the cost of a Thunder Wave, it's probably worth doing at this stage in the game.
And at the same time, Michelle has to find a way to deal with that Zamazenta because it can be so tanky out there on the field. Calyrex does rejoin the fray here. It's going to be on Michelle's side. That Calyrex Ice Rider going to be applying a lot of pressure. Could even try and go for something like the Leech Seeds here. You have to watch out for the Wide Guard, of course, but it's going to have to take a body press for its troubles as Miraidon free to go for the Electro Drift. Will find its target target down onto the opposing Zamazenta. There's no electric terrain, but even so, that does over 50%, showing the formidable presence it can have with those choice specs, but it will take a drop now thanks to the parting shot.
Yeah, and that parting shot is really nicely timed because the Incineroar are going to be able to go back out. You'd probably expect the Calyrex to come back onto the field now, and it's going to be in a prime position to start putting down some Astro Barrages on the field, or even take the opportunity to go for a nasty plot to boost that special attack even further and put Lewis in a really commanding position, especially when you're supported by the Zamazenta. The Miraidon has taken that special attack drop, so this next Electro Drift not probably going to be able to pick up the Zamazenta. And do you worry about the Calrex Ice Rider so much? Because that is not really in a position where it is going to be able to threaten too much of a knockout here. It's got the Leech Seed, it can put that out into the field, but it's very passive in this situation. The only thing that would threaten is a Trick Room, but have you got the room to be able to take an Astro Barrage in this situation to get the Trick Room set up?
That's a good question, and I think as well, you know, the Miraidon has been really effectively neutralized by Lewis here. You've got rid of the terrain, you've given it a parting shot as well. So Michelle's maybe in a position where he wants to get the Miraidon off the field so that you can try and set that up later on. But the Wide Guard finally comes through. That means that these spread type attacks are not going to be able to connect on Lewis's side of the field, and the Calyrex can capitalize on this and go for this nasty plot. So really hoping that a potential Glacial Lance is going to be blocked, as Miraidon, we know, locked into the Electro Drift, will have to commit to this, goes into the Zamazenta, but it's not enough to get the knockout. That parting shot paying off so well, enabling Zamazenta to stay in this match.
A great play here from Lewis, and being able to survive that parting shot, so pivotal in being able to allow that nasty plot. You think maybe the Michelle went for the Trick Room there to try and get the Twisted Dimension set up to get that speed control, but not going for it, going for the Glacial Lance, and unfortunately getting caught out by that well-timed Wide Guard. It's going to be actually intact this next turn, but the thing is, the Miraidon now in that really awkward position. Yes, it's got light screen support, but is it going to be enough to allow it to survive a +2 Life Orb boosted Astro Barrage?
That's the thing, it's going to be so much damage coming this way, but we have just seen the utility of when the stats are manipulated, where the damage counters can roll. But it's such a beautiful turn for Lewis here. You also managed to make sure that Zamazenta's in play again. You haven't lost a Pokemon here, and the Wide Guard just so beautifully shutting down that opposing Calyrex. But it's time to get all beautiful and bejeweled up here on the final stage, as Terrestrialization has been locked in for this Calyrex Ice Rider, so it will be turning into a Water type, trying to resist some of the potential Astral Barrage damage that can come its way, capitalizing on dropping its weakness and that light screen in play to try and give it the longevity on the field. Wide Guard comes through once again to ensure that a Glacial Lance is not going to be able to get damage on Lewis's side, paving a way for the opposing Calyrex to go for this Astral Barrage. It will connect on both the opposing Pokemon here, and can it get the knockout? No, light screen still paying off so strong.
Yeah, you can see the value of that light screen and why the Grimmsnarl here is such a great choice, as the Electro Drift now be into the Calrex, and it is going to be doing some nice damage. Nowhere near enough to pick up this big threat, as finally the Trick Room is turned on.
Now, we've seen Michelle pull this move before, and as soon as that Trick Room goes up, the Calyrex Ice Rider is in a prime position. However, Wide Guard is still on the field, so that's a really difficult spot to allow this Calyrex to shine. You could try and go for something like Leech Seed to start setting up, but the fact that the Astral Barrage can still come through and connect, and you cannot stop it, means Calyrex might be on borrowed time.
Yeah, it could be on borrowed time here. I don't know if you want to maybe just try and let the Miraidon go down, or if you switch something in that's a bit more preferable to take those Astral Barrages. You know, something like the Incineroar next to the Calyrex would be a lot more preferable. You get your Miraidon off the field then, and then you can bring it in later to get that Electric Train set up, knowing that you can deal, or better deal, with these opposing Pokemon. Once the Incineroar's on the field, then you can use that Fake Out into the Zamazenta, or at least stop it from going for a Wide Guard one turn, while then you can utilize that Glacial Lance to try and get rid of this Calyrex. It's in a really awkward position, and because of that, switching straight out.
Yeah, Lewis saying, you know what, my nasty plot boost, it's great, but I don't need it right now. What is more important is getting the Incineroar here on the field. It can throw that Intimidate down, stop the Calyrex from maybe doing as much damage, because if Zamazenta keeps going for the Wide Guard, it can't deal a huge amount. So maybe as soon as it decides to switch off that Wide Guard, you need to stop the Calyrex from being able to capitalize on it. Calyrex just goes straight for the Leech Seed, however. Now there's minimal HP remaining on the Zamazenta, so maybe this turn or maybe one more will actually be able to get the knockout, as Miraidon goes for the partner slot here and targets down with this Electro Drift. Incineroar taking just under a half damage here.
Yeah, that's really useful damage onto the Incineroar. I do take a little bit of recoil damage from that Rocky Helmet, of course, but well-timed Leech Seed, because that's going to give you really valuable health back onto the Calyrex here. It will take down the Zamazenta in turn. The one thing about this Water-type Terrestrialization, it does leave you very vulnerable against the Rillaboom that can come back into play now and have those big, powerful grass-type attacks that are going to be able to hit so hard, and especially when you're next to the Incineroar that Lewis has got access to now, you can at least prevent a Glacial Lance from play. Now you've lost that Zamazenta and the Wide Guards removed from the field.
With the Reflect up, though, maybe there's a way to get around the potential physical offensive pressure that the Rillaboom can deal out, but you still have to burn through one turn of Trick Room with the Fake Out that both the Incineroar and the Rillaboom are capable of dealing here. Miraidon definitely looking to be in a difficult spot, and Miraidon possibly, if you switch it out here for Michael, not only can you maybe throw an Intimidate down with your own Incineroar, but then you can reset the terrain later on to allow Miraidon to shine.
Yeah, and that's a really good call. I think that's one thing that you could do, but maybe Lewis sees through that. Maybe. For maybe a U-turn from your Rillaboom into that Miraidon slot. You know it's locked into the Electro Drift, and if you can just get the U-turn into it rather than going for a Fake Out.
Oh, no Fake Out!
No Fake Out and getting caught out!
Glacial Lance comes through, not going to be able to get the knockout though. That Intimidate really helping out here as Parting Shot comes through instead from this Incineroar. So a reposition here, wanting to Intimidate and Fake Out later on, try and burn through another turn of Trick Room into that Miraidon. So even if Miraidon would be able to connect and attack here, it's going to be at a weaker damage pace. But Rillaboom still to move, and I think the U-turn could be a great way to guarantee that KO.
Yeah, it could be a really useful way and still preserve that Fake Out, preserve that Grassy Terrain for later on if the Miraidon does stick around and decide to go out later, but not going to have the opportunity. The U-turn into that slot, finally taking this big restricted Miraidon down.
I like that because the U-turn guarantees the KO, but if there had been a potential switch there, the Parting Shot will at least negate the offensive pressure that the Pokemon in the back could bring forward. You know, you just want to try and make sure Incineroar isn't going to be able to deal too much. But Incineroar for Lewis now back on the field. That Intimidate coming through will connect on the Calyrex because it's the leftover variant, not that Clear Amulet we're so used to seeing.
Yeah, and almost it's a bit of a double-edged sword here where having the faster Incineroar in this Trick Room environment is going to backfire on Michael, when now Lewis's Incineroar is actually going to be able to get the Fake Out off before Michael's, preventing the Calyrex from attacking. Again, it's just protected as well, so it's going to be in that vulnerable spot against the Calyrex Shadow Rider, and it could go for the Terastallization here. It could get rid of that weakness to the Dog type. It is impending coming out from the Incineroar on Michael's side with that knockoff that would be so detrimental. Be able to get rid of that Life Orb, and not only that, it would be able to easily pick up a knockout as well.
There's a lot of potential threats on the field right now, and I think that Calyrex, as you said, has to watch out for the potential knockoff from the Incineroar, so it's going to need its partner to go for the Fake Out and shut that potential down. Calyrex not going on the offensive, instead setting up another Leech Seed to try and gain as much HP back, combined with this grassy terrain on the field as well, and combined with its leftovers. As the Shadow Rider says, I lost my nasty plot earlier, but you know what, it was kind of useful. I want it back again. I'm going to utilize this position to get set up, so when Trick Room is over, this game is going to be mine.
Yeah, and if you can keep that Incineroar in a nice, healthy position for when that Trick Room ends, you're going to be able to go for that Helping Hand Astral Barrage, and even against these two targets, the Light Screen up, it's still going to be close. I think the Light Screen's the big turning point for this, for Michael, to just have that security, knowing that you might be able to take these big attacks and then return with a knockout yourself. There's the Light Screen ending. Now you're going to be more vulnerable to that Astral Barrage. Of course, you've still got the Trick Room to contend with, though, so you are the fastest thing on the field if you're Michael, but you have to guarantee, if you're attacking, you have to guarantee taking down that Calrex. If you don't, if you miss the knockout, 2 nasty plots under its belt, it is going to be able to do some significant damage, and it might be enough to sway the tide.
And even though you don't have to contend with Wide Guard, there's really not offensive pressure Calyrex is able to deal with Glacial Lance thanks to the Intimidate that it's taken. So if I was Michael, I'd almost want to get the Calyrex off the field, reset those. Yes, you lose your Leech Seeds, but if you can get something like the Grimmsnarl back on the field and set that Light Scream up, that's going to give you a little bit of a buffer against this nasty plot boosted Calyrex. But as soon as Trick Room's over, you know, Calyrex is going to be in a prime position on Lewis's side, and you have to find a way through it. A Assault Vest Incineroar is a great way, but you need to be able to land that knockoff.
Yeah, we're just going to see the Protect here from the Calyrex to try and stall out these remaining turns of the Trick Room here. There's going to be a Parting Shot from the Incineroar, so going to pivot out once again. It'll free up the way for the Rillaboom to come back onto the field. It'll be interesting to see Michael goes for a Parting Shot themselves into that slot to get their own Calyrex back onto the field.
And there's still the Terastallization to be utilized on Lewis's side as well, so that could be a nice way for Calyrex to get around this by going for that Dark Terror type. But right now, it can safely go for the Protect. No need to utilize that and reveal it at this point in time. Obviously, having the Rillaboom on the field, very nice to have that Fake Out potential, but you have to watch out for this Grimmsnarl because it's going to be able to take the Leech Seeds now that were left behind by that opposing Calyrex. And even though Reflect's gone off, you can set up that light screen. You now have to contend with the Trick Room as well, so a lot of variables for Michelle to contend with.
Yeah, and you've got the Grimmsnarl back out onto the field as that light screen's ended, and you can set that up once again. It's going to give you that little bit of a stability against the Astral Barrage. And with 2 dog types out on the field now, you really are in a nice, comfortable position if you are Michelle, because you can utilize that light screen, you can utilize then the Flare Blitz from the Incineroar into either one of the 2 targets. You would probably want to go for the Calyrex, and maybe this forces the Calyrex off the field because it's not really going to be able to utilize the 2 attacking options very strongly. It's got the immunity, the Psychic there is useless into these 2 Dark-type Pokemon. The Astral Barrage is your only option, and why we're seeing it switch out for maybe trying to reposition that for a little bit later on in this game.
Exactly, and also a U-turn to allow Michelle a little bit of repositioning could be damaging into the opposing Calyrex, particularly if it did want to go for a terrestrialization. Instead, the Incineroar on the opposing side going to be able to take that really well, deal a little bit of Rocky Helmet recoil for its troubles as Michelle uses the opportunity to reposition. So we know the Calyrex has to come onto the field now as the only Pokemon in the back, and that is something that Rillaboom has to contend with as well, with the potential Glacial Lance coming forward in the next turn.
Yeah, and the problem is you've still got that Rillaboom on the field. It is going to threaten with those Wood Hammers. They can do some considerable damage. And it's into the right slot. It's not. It's into the Grimmsnarl. And that is a lot of damage. The recoil will not be kind to the Rillaboom and take it down. So that one threat that Michelle had to worry about more than anything is now removed from play. The Spirit Break going to follow up with that and do some nice damage. Just chip damage, but it might be really crucial damage to that Incineroar in this end game.
I like this play, though, coming through from Michelle, because you were kind of doubling up into what was the Calyrex Shadow Rider, and either you get the knockout there or it terrestrializes and you guarantee the KO, but at the cost of your Grimmsnarl here as well. You know, the Rocky Helmet has been able to get the KO. The Rillaboom has gone down to its own recoil. It's a lot of passive damage that's being dealt in recoil, and whether or not now Incineroar and the Calyrex is going to be enough for Michelle versus the Calyrex and Incineroar on Lewis's side, time is going to tell. But Trick Room's over now, so possibly the speed could be with Lewis.
Yeah, but the way that Michelle's woven this board position and set it up to have this active fake out to slow down this Incineroar and open up a Glacial Lance into the opposing Calyrex. You're in a position as well, you're so healthy, you're going to be able to take an Astral Barrage from the incoming Calyrex. You just have to be worried about that play of Helping Hand Astral Barrage, but will it be enough to take down this full health Calyrex? I don't know if it will, but we'll soon find out.
That's the play, and it's one way to go around the fake out as Helping Hand will have that priority. The Astral Barrage comes through. It will connect on both of Michelle's Pokemon here. It's not going to be able to get the KO on either of them. Too much HP on Calyrex's side to contend with, meaning that the Incineroar can just go straight for this Flare Blitz, get the knockout, and allow the Calyrex to clean up the Incineroar in the next turn.
Yeah, unless it goes for the Leech Seed, and it'll be wearing it down slowly
slow
but
and steady.
But we'll see what we go for. Is it going to be that Glacial Lance? Just to cover bases in case anything happens to the Incineroar. It is not quite enough, but it looks like Michelle has put themselves in a position to saw this one up, and what a really well executed, intricate game plan they've had to play to get around the big threats on Lewis's side of the field.
So many twists and turns from both of these trainers in this game one of our grand finals. I have to say, Michelle bringing the Grimmsnarl, I know a Pokemon that he had a few doubts about, but the way that it was able to come in with those light screens and the Reflects really, really paid off, particularly in the face of Pokemon like the Calyrex. We saw that the longevity was giving Michelle the opportunity to keep Pokemon in the game, to be able to reposition and facilitate this end game situation.
Yeah, and I think Lewis here just taking as much time as they can just to think about how they've approached this match, what has went wrong for them here to come away from this first game with a loss, and how they can reevaluate approaching the second game to try and tie this up so we can go to that game 3. But Michelle doing everything right here. I think the way that they used their Miraidon just to whittle down the Zamazenta on Lewis's side, remove that restricted first. That was the big problem. Get rid of that first, and then we can go from there. We are seeing Lewis finally lock in with that terrestrialization just to give themselves a little bit extra time, and this is really key. I think any extra time you can get in between now and that next team lock for the team preview going into game 2 is going to be valuable in helping decide how you go into this next game into the Helping Hand coming out. Damage there, just Helping Hand into nothing as the knockoff comes out and able to clean this up. Michelle taking game 1 here in the finals.
Amazing to be able to see Michelle come through with such a commanding start, but it was very difficult. Treacherous traps set out by Lewis the whole way through this game, particularly with that Y-Guard. And I think he made a great observation that Michelle, had said previously, Wide Guard Zamazenta is a really difficult Pokemon for my team, and he just made sure to remove that as quickly as possible to allow Calyrex to start going for those Glacial Lancers, because it's the only way for that physical damage to really come through on the board.
Yeah, and how well he dealt with the Rillaboom, because that is an immediate threat if you decide you have to go down the Terastallization route with your Calyrex Ice Rider. Yeah, you open yourself up to becoming weak to these grass-type attacks, and when they're boosted by the grassy terrain, I mean, Grimmsnarl, not one of those Pokemon that's weak to grass-type attacks, but you saw how powerful that Wood Hammer was into that Pokemon. Calyrex not wanting to contend with that, but didn't really have to face up to any sort of threat from the Rillaboom throughout that game, with how well Michelle positioned his Calyrex throughout and everything around it, utilizing that Incineroar so well. Like I say, it comes back, I think, to the start of the game with that Miraidon, utilizing that Electro Drift, not worrying about having to take it off the field to get that Electric Train set back up, just saying, okay, I've got consistent good damage that's backed up by this choice specs item. I'm going to get that damage onto the key important Pokemon that I want to remove early, and that was the Zamazenta, making sure that, yes, you have to go for those Wide Guards, because if you don't, there's a potential I can go for my Glacial Lancers, and that'll be detrimental to you. So it kind of pins the Zamazenta in a spot where it's just soaking up that damage one after another, to the point where it did eventually go down. And then that opened the door for Michelle to kind of unlock a few other pieces of the puzzle there, utilizing, like you said, the Grimmsnarl with that screen support. So pivotal, especially when there was that one opportunity for the Astral Barrage, which was boosted to get that attack off.
I mean, taking a look at Lewis's Pokemon, do we see any adaptations that could be made? The Choice Scarf on the Urshifu, really nice to be able to give you kind of a speedier edge, particularly with the Water Terror, but do you think it's got a place here?
I don't know. I think it's very difficult to bring it. I think the four that Lewis brought are probably the right choice.
Well, let's see if they've brought the same ones in this match. Front and center, it's going to be the Rillaboom with the Calyrex. On the opposing side for Michael, it's going to be that Landorus that we've seen be so formidable in top 4, paired up with that Grimmsnarl. You can just see it poking over the graphic there.
Yeah, you can. And the Landorus is a nice adaptation here, because behind the light screen that you can potentially get set up here with the Grimmsnarl, it can take attacks pretty well from the Calyrex. The only issue is you've got to contend with this Fake Out for the first turn, and the Grimmsnarl going to be a bit of a sitting target for that. It's not going to be able to get a screen up if we see a Fake Out from that slot, but we're starting off with a big Terastallization.
Yes, it's actually going to be on this Grimmsnarl. Not something you see every day, but that Ghost Terror type is going to be able to put it into a great position here, just removing some of the weaknesses it could potentially have. One of the interesting things is that Fake Out, of course, now is not going to be able to affect it, so it is going to be free to go for this Thunder Wave and start manipulating the speed controls. This is going to connect down into that Calyrex, not only paralyze it, but reduce its speed and give it the potential to not even move at all due to paralysis. Landorus follows up to add insult to injury with that Earth Power, doing a huge amount of damage, but the Calyrex able to break through it, knows it's in the finals here, and can go for this Astral Barrage. This will now do super effective damage to that opposing Grimmsnarl, so Grimmsnarl is out of here without being able to set up Light Screen, without being able to set up Reflect.
That is a massive trade-off, because yes, you expect the Fake Out to come into the Grimmsnarl there to slow it down, prevent the screens getting set up or anything else disruption-wise. So you go for that Terastallization, but in doing so, you're taking super effective damage from the Astral Barrage. And that, if that does happen, you could see the Grimmsnarl's gone in one. Is it worth the Paralyzed on the Calyrex? That's the question. You've got some nice damage off onto it already. The Landorus, it's an iffy situation, of course, if there was no Intimidate here. I think that Intimidate is going to help out take that Crossing Glide from the oncoming Rillaboom. And you do have Fake Out now, you can lean into a bit more here. But the Calyrex in a horrible position because of that Paralysis. It is going to go down to any attack if the Landorus is able to land anything this next turn, even though you've lost that Grimmsnarl so early on in this game.
That's the thing, you lose the Grimmsnarl, but you are able to stop that Calyrex from going first, allowing your Landorus to threaten the knockout. Incineroar, not even needing the Fake Out, goes for this damage into the opposing Rillaboom. We know this is a speedy Incineroar, and it's just showing what it can do, as Landorus can follow up with that Earth Power, actually leaving that Calyrex unchecked, maybe thinking that Lewis was going to switch it out. You remove the Rillaboom from play, and now the Calyrex has a free reign to go for another Astral Barrage. It's already at +1, so connecting down into the opposing Landorus is going to be able to get the KO, but the Dark typing on that Incineroar, leaving it on the field.
Yeah, there's a big critical hit there. Not really going to matter too much on the Landorus. Already in range of an Astral Barrage. You're going to get that Grim and near boost to the Calyrex, but it's the slowest thing on the field, and that Life Orb recoil is going to chip down it at every single turn, and it's not got many turns, and before it is going to be knocked out. The one thing that you would have said was, okay, well, you can understand why the Rillaboom gets taken out here, because if you've got that Miraidon on the back, you can lock in that Electric Train for the rest of the game, and yeah, that Calyrex is going to be easy to deal with, even if the Zamazenta comes out, but it's not. It is the Calyrex here. There is the possibility that you can Terastallize if you're on Michelle, but I think now you've got to... Do you go for the Trick Room? Probably not, because it's pretty awkward. You've got to get rid of that Calyrex because of the paralysis here. The Incineroar in a nice position where it could go for that, but also Lewis has the body press to be able to deal with that Incineroar before it is able to get an attack off, and why we're seeing the Calyrex on Lewis's side switch out.
And now you have to contend with the wide guard as well. Not only that, but the Intimidate comes through to ensure these Astral Barrages, if Lewis wants to let them go through, are not going to be dealing as much damage. So no wide guard, a cheeky little body press to be able to deal with the Incineroar, and then suddenly, as quick as a flash in this game too, Michael Kelsch is down to his last remaining Pokemon against the 3 remaining on Lewis's side. Of course, Glacial Lance coming through, but this is going into a Zamazenta and Incineroar. That is pitiful damage.
Yeah, it's not the damage output that you kind of want from this situation here. And down to your last restricted, maybe there's a chance if you saw the Leech Seed come out onto the Zamazenta, we kind of start to force switching out and switching around from Lewis's side. But even though it looked pretty bleak with the paralysis onto the Calyrex, I think now this bold position between Zamazenta and Incineroar here is just going to be able to kind of clean this matchup pretty quickly, especially because that Terrasalization's been spent.
Yes, and I think it might be back to the drawing board for Michael here going into a potential Game 3, but this is exactly the Lewis that we saw in top 4, coming out in such commanding fashion and just going through this team of 6 that Michael and the top 4 opponent had utilized here. Body press coming through, just chipping away at Calyrex as knockoff comes through to put it into the range of a KO in the following turn. Leftovers are gone. You can use the grassy terrain to get a bit of recovery. You can use the Leech Seed, but the fact that Calyrex is also slower than the opposing Pokemon means as soon as they're both able to break through a potential protect, then they're going to be able to get the knockout.
Yeah, and you're not going to be able to recover enough damage in time, especially without that leftovers. It's just not going to stack up as quickly to get outpaced by the damage that's coming from Lewis's side of the field. And now it is just a matter of time before we do see this set tied up, and we are going to be going to a Game 3, because I think the way that Lewis is able to command this, really catching Michael off guard there, going for that Terrasalization, was it worth it? Well, you would say on the back of that game, probably not. The Terrasalization on the Grimmsnarl was really detrimental. Yes, you got the Thunder Wave off, but really, did it get you anywhere in the end? No. It's tied you up, and now you've got all the work to do to get your hands on that trophy to lift that championship.
I mean, I like the strategy. The Thunder Wave coming through, slowing down that opposing Calyrex, and hoping that there would maybe be a paralysis there. But I think the issue was you then left it unchecked. Maybe thinking Lewis was going to switch it out, and you targeted down into that Rillaboom, and as soon as the Astral Barrage could come through again, the damage was just monumental. So even if you slow it down, you can't count it out, let's say, because you can break through that paralysis. You can steamroll through with these Grimmsnarl boosts.
I think the danger there is, of course, if you kind of get in that situation where you're up against that Rillaboom and the Calyrex, there's always the potential of the fake out into the Grimmsnarl to stop the screens, and then the Calyrex goes for a nasty plot, and then the next turn you're in that really awkward position where you're staring down at a +2 Calyrex with a Life Orb, and it's going to be doing instrumental damage to the Landorus. It can't terrestrialize out of that weakness. The Grimmsnarl, yes, you can get the light screen up, but you can go for a Thunder Wave there, but you've got to be careful. Again, we've talked about that dark typing on Lewis's Calyrex. In that situation, it would probably be really preferable to go for it. So it's a really tricky situation. I don't know if that was the right lead out the Landorus, if that was the play, because if you can take advantage of that Thunder Wave a little bit better in that scenario, where you can go for it and then pick up the knockout onto the Calyrex, things turn a little bit better for you, because you still keep your Pokemon numbers, and you've got the ability to switch around when those last 2 Pokemon come in on Lewis's side.
I mean, sometimes when we are a game up, we see trainers go for something a little bit spicier, maybe throw a rogue choice in, perhaps, and that's maybe what Michael was doing here. So if you go back to maybe a more tried and tested slow and steady strategy we were seeing in Game 1, where you were utilizing all the opportunities for some damage potential, that could give us a more of a thriller of a Game 3. But Pokemon trainers, if you're just joining in, there is one game between these trainers and the champion title. Rillaboom and Calyrex Shadow Rider out for Lewis against the Miraidon and the Incineroar for Michael.
Yeah, this feels a little bit better, a bit more stable than that Landorus. It did offer that great offense, but so does the Miraidon as well. We see the electric terrain set up. It'll be undone by the grassy terrain from the Rillaboom, but there is active fake out here. The predominant fake out is going to be on Michael's side. It is going to be the fastest thing on the field in regards to it and the Rillaboom, so it will get the jump to be able to stop that Rillaboom going for the fake out onto the Miraidon, and leaves that Miraidon in a position where it can go for a Volt Switch. It will be going after the Calyrex, but it should be bulky enough to be able to take an Astral Barrage. It's not going to activate that Grimmsnarl ability, and you don't have the help in hand this turn if you are Lewis. Why we're seeing the Rillaboom switch out, probably to try and preserve that grassy terrain to later if the Miraidon leaves the field.
And I think it knows that it will have the slower fake out, so there's no point trying to utilize that at this point. Let's just bring the Incineroar in, but it's actually going to be a defensive play from the Calyrex here, just going straight for a protect, maybe seeing what this Miraidon is going to lock into, as the fake out was indeed going down into that Rillaboom slot to try and slow it down. Going to take a little bit of Rocky Helmet damage here, as Miraidon reveals that it was the Draco Meteor, but it was going into that protect, so no damage on the Incineroar as the switch in.
Wow, a huge Draco Meteor as the option there into the Calyrex, which probably would have been enough with that choice specs. You think may be very close without the electric terrain to pick up the knockout there. Now the Incineroar's back on the field for Lewis. You've got active fake out, can slow down either the Miraidon or this Incineroar on the next turn, or you've got the option to go for that help in hand, or even pivot out, keep your board momentum going with a parting shot into something like the Miraidon. It is forced off the field, of course. It doesn't really want to contend with taking a free Astral Barrage. Grimmsnarl going to be able to take something like that a lot better.
And it's a nice way to bring the Hadron engine back online if you can reset the terrain a little bit later on. But the Terrestrialization coming out here on this Calyrex, it is going to be turning itself into a Dark type here. So this is actually a little bit dangerous in the face of a Grimmsnarl that can go for something like a Spirit Break. But first things first, we're going to see the fake out come through into that Grimmsnarl. And it goes for a nasty plot on the opposing side. So actually the Terrestrialization nice here to be able to give it a little bit of breathing room. Not going to have to worry about a knockoff coming through from the potential Incineroar, but instead it's that U-turn dealing super effective damage actually.
Yeah, super effective damage, and the little bit of chip is going to be very useful in this game. Now you've got the Grimmsnarl positioned onto the field. It's going to have access to be able to go for those light screens this next turn, which is going to give that layer of security against this Miraidon. It has to take an Astral Barrage this next turn. It probably will, with the light screen, be able to take this pretty comfortably, but you've got to worry about, again, that help in hand combination with the Astral Barrage. With that +2 that it's sitting on now, it's still going to be touch and go. The Grimmsnarl going to be in a position where it can take that, and you can return, like you said. Now that Spirit Break is going to be super effective into the Calyrex, but rather than go for a Spirit Break here, you've got to kind of spend that turn going for the light screen. We don't see anything just committed to yet. Lewis want to take their time with things and just get that protect off.
I think, you know, because of the priority light screens going up anyway, but this way you scout out what the Miraidon is going to lock into, and once again it is just going to be that Draco Meteor trying to remove the opposing restricted from the field. The Incineroar on Lewis's side now able to go for the parting shot. Will find its mark down onto the Grimmsnarl, just in case maybe in the following turn, if it's able to get that Spirit Break in, or in case there was a switch adjustment, you can now negate some of the offensive pressure that can be dealt out there. I think as well this is a nice opportunity for Lewis to bring the Rillaboom in from the back, because not only do you then reset the terrain to turn off the Hadron engine and allow a little bit of that chip damage from the U-turn to be recuperated, but you now have the fake out as well in that following turn.
Yeah, and you've got the fake out into the Grimmsnarl. You might want to go for it into the Miraidon, but I think without the electric terrain, knowing your calc, so you're going to be able to take that attack pretty comfortably. And what's better in this situation, taking a Spirit Break or taking a Draco Meteor? I think probably the option's going to be down to Lewis here. Maybe stopping that Miraidon is the better option in this scenario, and then getting that Astral Barrage off and potentially picking up a knockout. But because of that, we are seeing the pressure there that Michelle is switching it out. He's going to keep that for later on and try and keep control of that terrain, bringing the Incineroar back onto the field, dropping another Intimidate. Going to be important into that physical attacker and the Rillaboom as the fake out comes out into that slot.
Yeah, it was trying to shut down the Miraidon as another nasty plot comes through. All eyes are on this Calyrex, and Lewis really banking on to be able to pull through. Spirit Break will come through thanks to the parting shot earlier. Even though it's super effective, it's going to be able to hang on, and thanks to the two nasty plots, it's still going to be there at +3.
Yeah, +3 is still very, very strong in a position. And I think now, if you are Lewis, you're going to have to try and weave in that Zamazenta. It's the one thing that you can put next to that Calrex, and then pressure things like this Incineroar and the Grimmsnarl that are proving so difficult for Lewis to take any sort of momentum swing with, even though you've got that +3 Astral Barrage kind of sitting ready to be fired off.
The issue is, though, obviously you've got this potential fake out that can go through, so you might need to protect on the opposing Calyrex, but then that could give Michelle the opportunity to bring in the Miraidon from the back and try and apply pressure that way. There's going to be a lot of moves and counter moves here, particularly with Incineroars and Rillabooms in our finals. Incineroar does come in for Lewis here as the protect does indeed come through, not wanting to take that fake out on another Spirit Break from the Grimmsnarl here. But Michelle could read into this. No fake out coming through. Instead, the Reflect gets set up to give you some pressure against the opposing physical attackers, as it looks like Incineroar was just trying to get the KO done here. Goes for that potential Flare Blitz. Yeah,
and now you've got the fake out from Lewis's side to support the Calyrex a little bit better. So you've got the option to shut down the potential opposing targeting Incineroar from Michele's side of the field. But again, if you expect the fake out into that Incineroar slot, do you just go for a switch out here, maybe into the Miraidon or something, or do you just stop this Spirit Break from coming out? Problem is, this Astral Barrage is going to be super effective, and another nasty plot, taking it to +5.
+5, I mean, I love this, but it needs to be able to go for moves, to be able to get knockouts. It hangs on.
Just enough for it to survive. That's huge.
Oh my goodness, and of course the flinch coming through from that Grimmsnarl, so no damage can come on the board, but honestly, I cannot handle my nerves right now. If this Calyrex goes down before it's able to go for the Astral Barrage, these nasty plots will have been for nothing.
Okay, so we've got the light screen set up, and now you're +5. Now you've got the help and hand support with the Incineroar active next to you. You've got to think, even though there are 2 resisted Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, it might be enough to take these Pokemon down, depending on how they're trained. But they're giving Lewis the best opportunity to do this, and there it is. There's the helping hand. Is it going to be enough to take these 2 Dark types down?
Let's have a look. Astral Barrage will come through. It's going to connect. Can it do it? Can Calyrex get the double knockout? It gets 1, but it's not enough on the Incineroar.
It's not enough, and the recall damage coming in, and it's going to have a slither of health left with another Grimmsnarl boost, taking it to +6 now, and the Incineroar able just to clean up. It had enough in the tank to hang on and close this one off for an option now going forward for Lewis.
The boldness and the bravery of that Calyrex, but the audacity of the Incineroar to hang on and get the knockout in retaliation as well. You saw the roar of victory as it went back into its Pokeball, and I think that's well deserved. Michele now has the utility to switch things up again, bring in the Miraidon, reset that terrain, and start applying some more pressure. Now that powerhouse of a Calyrex has gone.
And do you bring the Miraidon in now, knowing that one of the options that's in the back for Lewis is that Rillaboom? Potentially is an option, of course, or do you opt for the Calrex here, which could come in and then maybe try and disrupt a little bit from its own perspective? But the Miraidon opted for, it's going to be the fastest thing to come onto the field now, and even if the Zamazenta is opted for over the Rillaboom, it's still going to be able to do some nice, respectable damage with that Electro Drift.
I honestly think Assault Vests are going to be all the fashion after this tournament, considering that enabled Incineroar to hold on after that Astral Barrage. Now we're going to see the Calyrex and Miraidon, both the restricted for Michele, coming out as he tries to close out this game and become the champion. But the nemesis of his team, the Zamazenta, is opposing him across the field. That Dauntless Shield boost is going to give the defense capabilities to the Zamazenta as well.
Yeah, and I think now you've got a couple of options if you're Michele. You can start going for these Volt Switches here too. You've got one Pokemon in the back there. You've got the Incineroar that you can Volt Switch out, kind of try and keep terrain control. Or you can do this where the Rillaboom comes onto the field to get rid of the electric terrain, you stay, then the next turn you position out and try and just chip away at this Zamazenta here. Leech Seed's a nice option in this situation as well, because you can start whittling away at it from that respect and just continually firing off these Electro Drifts.
Miraidon charges across the field, not very effective damage thanks to the Rillaboom coming in and resetting that terrain as well, but Calyrex capitalizing on this beautiful grassland here and going for the Leech Seed. So just going to be trying to get that recovery from its leftovers, Leech Seed and the grassy terrain to try and keep it in the match.
Yeah, now the Rillaboom on the field, it's going to be vulnerable to Glacial Lance now. There is the Y-God support, but if you leave the Zamazenta on the field, it's going to be sapped with that Leech Seed. You want to try and reset that, switch it out to maybe that Incineroar in the back. It does leave then the Rillaboom vulnerable to the Glacial Lance. So you've got to really make a tough decision here. Do you keep it on the field and not doing anything, and it maybe takes an Electro Drift in the process of doing that? Or not go for it at all and just go for the body press?
Yep, no Y-God coming through. Body press chipping away at this Miraidon as the Electro Drift changes its target. Critical hit takes the Zamazenta right down, but it's still here in the match. Rillaboom not able to get the KO, but of course there's Calyrex still to move. No Y-God. If it has indeed gone for the Glacial Lance, that's going to be able to get the knockout on the Zamazenta and do some damage to the opposing Incineroar that comes in. But if it's gone for the Leech Seed, then it can keep this slow and steady creep of health regeneration.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't go for the Glacial Lance, the Leech Seed will be enough to get the Zamazenta after this turn. And that's exactly what it's went, the slow and steady way of winning this race. And it's the Leech Seed into the Incineroar now. We will see a little bit of grassy terrain recovery. Is it going to be enough to allow the Zamazenta to hang on? I don't know. I question this. It will be very, very very tight. No, it's not enough. The Zamazenta going down. That critical hit being crucial at this turn of the match.
The grass giveth and the grass take it away with the Leech Seed and Grassy Terrain respectively. Looks like this Calyrex showing exactly why Leech Seed is an interesting tag for Michael to bring into this team. Rillaboom now joins the fray for Lewis here, but both are restricted to down. You've got your Incineroar, you've got your Rillaboom, but can they contend with the powerhouses left on Michael's side?
It doesn't appear so, with 3 Pokemon to 2, and 2 of those Pokemon that Michael still has access to are restricted Pokemon, the most powerful in the format. It seems a very tall task, but if any Pokemon can do it, Lewis has got 2 of the most popular non-restricted Pokemon in the Rillaboom and the Incineroar, so don't count them out just yet. But Michael has the option to reposition that Calyrex, get it off the field, or even the Miraidon if you want, to bring back and activate that Electric Terrain once again, and that is exactly what we're going to see. The Incineroar coming in, going to be great, going to drop and Intimidate onto these 2 physical attackers and make life so much easier for this Calyrex as well. Doesn't have to contend or worry about these big physical attacks as much as it once did.
It's almost like you're pushing them further down the hill that they have to climb by throwing that Intimidate across the field. The Incineroar on Lewis's side, not an offensive variant either. The Wood Hammer, interestingly enough, gets a knockout into an Incineroar, not something you see every day, but the issue is the Incineroar on Lewis's side is not necessarily going to be able to follow it up. It does have the knockoff though, and actually that going down into the opposing Calyrex, if it was able to connect, would be able to do a significant chunk of damage, but with all the recovery options this Calyrex has, I just do not see how Lewis is able to get it off the field.
No, and without any active fake out now to slow the Miraidon coming back onto the field, activating that Electric Terrain, and it's going to be in a position to drop either an Electro Drift into that Incineroar to remove it quite easily from play, or lock in with even a Draco Meteor at this stage. I think the Electro Drift is the more reliable choice. It's going to be able to pick up the Incineroar. Once you've done that with Miraidon, Glacial Land's going to be more than enough to deal with that Rillaboom.
Exactly, and Michael actually still has the utility to go for terrestrialization there, adding a little bit of flair to the end of this grand finals. I mean, it's nice to have both your restricteds applying so much pressure both on the special and physical side. It's so difficult for Lewis to come back into this.
Yeah, completely. It feels at this point that there is just a match lock, but you don't want to give up at any point. You never know what's going to happen. You never know. Electro Drift coming out from the Miraidon, and it will be into that Incineroar. Is it enough? Of course it's enough. Picking up a huge knockout, leaving that Rillaboom against these 2 behemoths on Michelle's side of the field.
You know what? Miraidon has tried the whole way through the set to get into Electric Terrain, and Rillaboom has always been there, stopping it every track of the way. And it's able to finally get the KO, but that Electro Drift really critical, removing the Incineroar from play. But now you have the Calyrex versus the Rillaboom, and the Glacial Land single target is going to be able to connect down into this opposing Rillaboom. It's been KO'd. Michael Kelsch takes the title here at the Utrecht Special Championships. Michael Kelsch is your champion.
Phenomenal play from Michael from start to finish. Everything was against them going into this match. The matchup was tough. Everything felt like it was not in their favor, but we said it, if there was one player to do it, it would be Michael. Performed extremely well throughout this entire weekend and coming out on top. What a deserving champion.